Welcome to Thinkin, a podcast series by Kautilya School of Public Policy.
Welcome to Thinkin, the podcast club of Kautilya School of Public Policy. I'm Trilok Kothapalli. Today we have with us a very special guest, Professor Steve Jarding. Even though he's a noted personality and is always on the news during the general elections in India, let me quickly introduce him to all of you. Professor Steve Jarding is a faculty in public policy, an American and international educator, writer and a political consultant. He has taught at the Harvard Kennedy School, where his courses on campaign management and making of a politician has twice been nominated for the most influential award, course award. His research focuses on political campaigns, political advertisement, campaign management, etc. In addition to academics, Steve is also a CEO of the international consulting company SJB Strategies, which advises candidates around the world. Throughout his 40 years of career, Jarding has advised presidents, prime ministers, mayors, governors, and many others in over 50 countries around the world. He's also a writer who co-authored books on political advertising, strategies, and campaigns. His profile goes on and on. I better stop here and get into a conversation with him. Welcome, Professor Steve. Welcome to our show today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Look forward to it.
So, Professor, finally you're on the campus. How do you feel here, and how your interactions have been with the students so far?
Well, I feel good. I mean, it's been good. The students are terrific. I'm not shocked, by the way. I was asked to help organize the school a couple years ago, and did that, worked with a terrific team. I think the dean is fabulous. It was a terrific choice. Sridhar has done a great job, I think, as kind of directing it, and the founders were very good. And then the recruiting process. The students, I was in that process. I did a lot of interviews, and as nerve-wracking as it is for some of the students, it really is a wonderful time to see the type of talent that's out there. And I will say, one of the things that I found, in the course that I teach on political communication, we do interviews and speeches the first week of class before we really do any training. And the scores for the students at Kautilya were slightly higher than the scores for the incoming students at Harvard when I trained there. So the committee must have done a decent job of selecting talent, and the talent clearly was there. So no, it's been terrific. It's exciting. Students are great, and the time's just going really too fast. But
Good to know that.
Yeah.
Professor, I know you have been part of this institute since the idea was envisioned, and you have been a strong advocate of public policy education, right? Can you take us through why do you think India need more public policy schools like Kautilya? And you've been part of Harvard Kennedy as well. What are the MPP alumni doing around the world? How are they impacting the world?
Well, first of all, the need for a school like Kautilya, the importance of public policy training, I think, has never been more important. If you look at what's going on in the world, our problems are so large today. They're very global, from global warming to automation, where our jobs are disappearing, to income inequality, transparency in government. There's just so many issues out there. But they're really global issues. And so many of our governments were built for 18th, 19th, 20th century. So we need, I think, to educate next generation leaders in schools of public policy to say we've got to adapt. We have to change just like the world is changing. And so you could not have a more important time to establish a school like this in not just in India history, but in world history. Because the other component of this, one of the reasons I'm extremely grateful and excited to be in India, is if you look at where the world is today and kind of the leaders of humanity in the 21st century, you have to have China with a seat at the table. The United States, I think you have to put a seat at the table. The European Union, as it expands and moves eastward into Eastern Europe, I think is at the table. But the fourth player at the table is India. There's no question about it. The human resource, the capacity in India is so fantastic that they have to take their rightful place at the table. But that makes it even more important that there's a school of public policy or schools of public policy that give training to next generation leaders. With regard to kind of what I was able to do, we were able to do at the Kennedy School, I'm extremely proud and humbled that hundreds of my students have gone on, literally hundreds, all across the world. About half of my students at Harvard were international students. but hundreds have gone on to elective office, including president, prime minister. I think I have several former students who are president, prime minister. I have a dozen that are in the process of running, and I'm proud of that because part of their training said, they told me, I probably wouldn't have done this if I didn't have the training, because you need to understand that politics is not necessarily difficult. It can be in the United States we talk about making sausage. It's an ugly process, but you have to go through it, and that's kind of what we're talking about. Is that if you can give campaign management, communication training, all these kind of tools that you need, where you say, oh, so many students go, oh, God, I don't think I'll get in because I'm not a great speaker, I'm nervous about it. If we can show them that it's not difficult to be a great communicator, to know issues, to know how to debate, and bring more people to the table that will get into public service and electoral politics, you're going to have better politics. And so when I look, and a lot of times when I speak around the world, I give a lecture that it's kind of an honest lecture that says, the world's a tough place. And we got to make a lot of decisions. And when I'm done with that, people in the audience say, oh my God, isn't that depressing? It's like, no, it's not. It's realistic, and they'll say, but does it depress you? And I say, not when I teach at places like Kothapalli. When I look out and I see the 44 students that I'm teaching this semester, and I see that they're fearless, I see that they're the most educated, they are the most communicative with social media, they're the most international. I look and I say, no, I think we'll be okay. We got work to do. We got to train your generation, but I feel we're in good hands.
Great, good to know that. Professor, how did this whole political consulting happen to you? Have you ever aspired to become a politician or something? How did you enter this space?
Yeah, somewhat by accident. I was a journalism and political science major in undergraduate school, and wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do, so I went through a master's in public administration program. Still wasn't quite sure. So I went to law school, and then I went to another master's program in government, and then a PhD program in government. And part of it was I wanted to have the capacity to diversify in my educational background to hopefully better allow me to have options afterward. And I enjoyed school, and I was able to do it. And back when I went to school, it was much less expensive than it is in the U.S. today. And so I was able to do that. And while I was teaching, going to school, I would teach a bit at the university level as an adjunct, and then I would maybe take some time and do a campaign. And so at the same time, and I did a lot of writing. I think writing is critical for young people today. So I was able to, while I was getting educated, I was able to dabble in some of these areas, and came to realize very quickly, both through my studies and my work, that if you want to change the world, public service, and elective public service particularly, is the most important vehicle. It's the most powerful vehicle. And I was educated, if you will, at an early age by a single parent, a mom that raised 8 kids alone. My dad died when I was 4 months old. I was the youngest. The oldest was 11. That she basically just challenged us and said, you get one life. Don't let your father's death somehow think that you're hamstrung. Go out and be the best you can be and change the world. And she pushed us hard on that. And all 8 of her kids went to college and university, and she did very well because I think of her inspiration. So that's what brought me to the table of this, is just as I kind of move through different educational levels, it kind of crystallized that public service matters. And if we can, I tell my students, if on the last day that you put your head in a pillow and take your last breath, if you can say the world is a better place because you walked upon it, then you probably had a pretty good life. But the converse is also true. If you say, well, I made a lot of money and I did pretty well for myself, but that's it. It's kind of a sad moment, right? Because you only get one shot. And so I tried to live my life that way. I try to instill those values into my students, into the people that I train and teach. And if we,
you are,
well, good. That's the right answer. Right? Well, I hope so. I mean, that to me is fulfilling. It's why I travel so much, after all these years, because it matters, and I want to do what I can do. So that's the goal. and it is literally a tribute and an honor for me to be here and to get a chance to work with the 44 talented young people, and I tell them, you guys are the best and the brightest. And I don't say that to blow. I tell them to blow smoke up your jeans. Right? I tell, it's daunting. It's a tremendous responsibility, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
But somebody needs to do it, and the people sitting in these classrooms are the next generation leaders. And I challenge them. I tell them the first day, tell me that the next great leader in India in the world is not sitting in this room today. And I say, you can't tell me that, because I think the next great leader may well be sitting here. But you have to kind of, it's the Gandhi thing that if you want to change the world, change yourself. And that's my challenge to my students, and I couldn't be more pleased as we're getting close to the end of the course now, that they seem to have accepted it, grasped it, and now we're in the process of finishing the training.
Yeah, I think in that way, public policy education also opens up a very diverse range of career opportunities.
It does. It does.
Okay. Professor, the political consultancy field itself is still at an nascent stage in India. It's still undersaturated. We got to hear about all of this maybe early 2014 or something like that, right? So how do you think this space is going to evolve further, and what are the potential challenges that come in our way?
Well, I think it will evolve. I mean, you can't have a nation as important as India and as young as India, certainly as a representative government, largest democracy in the world, that professional campaign skills need to come into the arena. And I'm not saying they're not here, but the history just doesn't suggest that it's developed as it otherwise probably should be. My caution would be, you're going to get a lot of American consultants who come in and say, well, I know everything because in America we have constant campaigns. Well, they don't. And I would caution that, I mean, I've done consulting work here and certainly may well do more, but my premise is always, I think I can bring something to the table. I bring a world view. I've worked in 50 countries. I certainly worked in India. But I need to have a base in India. I need a foundation here to partner with, because I don't know culture, I don't know language, I don't know law and the history as I should, because I'm not from here. But if I can hire talented people in India to be that partner, and then with the kind of the world view and how to do voter contact, voter persuasion, voter turnout, self and opposition research, how to deal with disinformation, how to budget, how to, where should you spend your money, how to schedule a candidate, all the different components that go into a modern campaign. If I can partner with talented people on the ground, that's where I think India's consultancy should be. It should be a combination of homegrown talent that's here, but don't be afraid to reach out, because you are young still, and say, let's try to get best practices worldwide. That would be my ideal kind of vision for what India does to do it right. And I say, a lot of American consultants come in and say, I know everything. They don't. And if somebody told me that, I'd say, get out of here. I'll go hire somebody else. Doesn't mean they don't have talent, but they cannot come in and say, I know India, because they don't. You have to have a homegrown base. That's exciting to me, because when I do that, I learn from you, hopefully as much as you learn from me, and collectively we can be successful both for our candidates and for the country.
Right. So, Professor, you have worked with various leaders across the world, from prime ministers to city mayors, right? What are the few traits that you find in common in all these personalities that make them a good politician or an effective leader?
I think that it's a great question. I think the biggest trait is they have to understand that public service is not about those who serve. It's not about them. It's about those who would be served. When I go into a place, and very often at my stage in life and with the campaigns I've done, when I'm younger, they interview me and say, we're thinking to hire you. At my age and with my experience, I kind of interview them, right? So they're interviewing me, but it's kind of, well, I'm interviewing you too. What's your vision? What do you want for your country? What's your foundation? Where do you want to be 5 years from now or 6 years from now? And it starts with that concept of service. If the interview, if you will, is, oh my God, I need to do this for my own party or my own ideology or then I'm probably not too interested, because I tell people all the time, we have a whole bunch of elected officials who call themselves leaders, but they're merely elected officials. They merely have title. Leaders are individuals who understand that politics is bigger than they are. that politics isn't just the immediate. Do what's, what feels good in the immediate, do what looks good in the immediate so I can get reelected. Generational leaders understand that changes often that we make today won't be immediately felt. Maybe they won't be felt for years, but they're needed to create a better society for future generation Indians, Americans, wherever you're working. So it starts with that. If I interview with somebody and it looks like they have that solid foundation, they understand public service. Okay, now I'm interested. But there's some personality issues. I mean, sometimes it's not so much that you have to like somebody. I've certainly worked with people where I interviewed and it's like, they seem like a pretty good guy, but I don't know that I like them all that well. But I love that they understood service. And at the end of the day, as I said, service is bigger than they are anyway. So because I get it all the time, people say, do you always like the people you work for? And it's like, well, I hope I do, but that's not really the criteria. The criteria is what's their vision. And if you're together on that, my sense is you're probably going to have a pretty good relationship.
Good to know that. Professor, just to give you a context, 54% of India's population is under 25, but that doesn't represent in our parliament, right? Only 7% of our MPs are under 35. And this trend has been continuing since last 2 to 3 decades, right? And the bars are risen so high that for a common student like me to aspire to become a politician itself is a big thing, right? So how do you think students like me should be prepared to overcome all these obstacles and enter this space?
Well, it's hard. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, it's like women in India. 15% of the parliament is women is all in India. That's not uncommon worldwide. But the point is, it is hard for groups that, let's be honest, for the most part male, that haven't had their rightful numbers. It's hard to break in. There are institutional barriers, there's cultural barriers, there's all kinds of things. But I think the biggest barrier is here in us, that we say we can't do it because there's a cultural barrier or because this is the way it's been done. I like to look at politics and say, don't tell me what you can't do, let me try to tell you what I think you can do. And if we come from the perspective that it's too important for your generation, for the younger generation to have representation, and your generation gets motivated, you'll move political parties. I mean, the one thing that's consistent about politicians and parties worldwide is if the public speaks and speaks loudly, they tend to listen. If your generation is underwhelming in their demand for representation to bring young people in, then the response will be underwhelming. So I think the idea that as young people you form organizations, you form movements that say we demand our rightful voice, our rightful place, the odds increase tremendously that you'll get it. And I say that in no small part from experience. I for the last 9 years, been working with a young person's group in Romania. I did the same thing in Brazil as well. Primarily young people in their 20s and 30s who said, same thing, we're underrepresented, it's wrong, how do we break in? And we started movements. And I'm proud to say 9-10 years later in each of them, a tremendous percentage, much higher than it had been, of these young people are now in parliament, are ministers in government, are taking their rightful place, and they're bringing a group of young people with them. In Romania, the movement was essentially guaranteed seats in parliament if they would, essentially, instead of beating up on elected officials or saying, we're challenging you, we'll make you a part. And what they did is they brought in voices of tens of thousands of young Romanians, and it's been highly successful. Brazil has been successful in a different way. Their approach was a little different. But the point is, the bottom line is, they said, we're going to create an entity that elevates and magnifies our voice, and when we do that, we're going to demand more. And in each instance, they got more.
That was inspiring. Thank you. Professor, before we conclude, I just have a quick rapid fire questions. I'll ask you and then you have to quickly give me the answer.
I'll try to have rapid fire answers.
Okay, the first question. I know that you have been watching cricket since you have been in India. Who's the player that comes onto your mind when you think of cricket?
Is it Ruhal? Who was the guy that was it last night? He got like 100 points.
Virat Kohli. Virat Kohli.
Yeah, he's fabulous. He was terrific. I told the students, as you know, there's no cricket. Oh, this is rapid fire. But anyway, there's no cricket. Cricket is so much more fun than baseball, and I love baseball.
Well, thank you.
But it's just boom, 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 and it's like, oh, it's terrific. Sorry.
Okay, who's the leader that you really want to work in India?
Oh, if I knew, I couldn't tell you. Because sometimes they don't want people to know. There's several. There's a lot of young, I think, strong leaders, and there's several that I watch and I go, ooh, that would be a fun one.
Okay, but you want to work in India, right?
Oh yeah, no, I have done work.
That's enough for us. Have you ever failed in a subject during your college? Yes or a no?
No, I've never failed.
Okay.
I've underwhelmed occasionally.
Define Kautilya in one word.
Define
Kautilya in one word. The school.
Oh, it's been, I would say a surprise. Surprise, probably one word, but only because it's so quick. I mean, to be new and to have this establishment, you go, wow. I would have expected more, a little more kinks. You got to work stuff out, but no, they did a terrific job. I pleasantly surprised, if I can use two words.
Cool. If you have a chance to go back in time and decide your career again, if not political consulting and teaching, what would that be? You're happy with what you're doing?
Well, I'm happy with what I'm doing. Yeah, it took me a while, but no, I don't think I would change. Maybe if I could be like a real-time historian, you know, where you're writing, you know, you're in the room writing as history's unfolding, would be fantastic. I just don't think there is such a thing.
Okay. What's your favorite food dish?
Oh God, food dish. Well, this is horrible because I'm old and I still love pizza.
Okay.
Although I love Indian food. My problem, this is typical American, right? My problem is I'll eat something that's really good and I'm like, I can't remember the name of it. And so we'll go to restaurants and students will say, oh, what do you want? And I'll go, what was that thing we had the other night? Because that was really good.
You should try Hyderabadi biryani then.
Okay, all right.
Lastly, where do you want to go on your next vacation?
Oh God. I've always wanted to go to Cuba, and I had chances and I didn't, and I want to go to Iceland.
Okay.
So I'll put 2 on the table.
Please go after this.
Okay, well, I can't. I got to go to London and then back to the States.
Thank you, Professor. That's the end of the interview. Thank you so much for taking out time.
Thank
it was
you.
Nice speaking to you.
It was my pleasure. Take care.